Live from MMA Fighting Studios, this is Between the Links. And now, your host, Mike Heck.
The iconic voice of Esther Lynn welcomes you to a brand new edition of BTL. Thank you for being here. It's good to be back chatting with all of you. I've had some voice issues for the past week. Turns out I have a pretty gnarly case of strep throat, so if I sound like a Muppet at any point during the show, please forgive me and try to ignore it. But we are coming off of a memorable UFC 290 event, some major storylines coming out of that card, great moments, perhaps not so great moments. We've had some big fights announced and much more. This should be a fun week, my friends, as we have ourselves a very rare immediate rematch here on BTL. Let's begin with the man who I think is officially the BTL champion for life. The man put it all out there, stuck to his guns, didn't let the haters talk him down. And this past Saturday night, he was proven right. Folks, the victory lap continues for the wise predictor himself, Jed Meshew from MMAfighting.com. How are we feeling, Jed? Look at that.
Look at it, Mike. Look at it. I'm the king. I got my rematch. I called this last week. I said if he wins, you have to come back. All of you have to vote for me this week. I will finally defeat this man because I am the forever champion like Amanda Nunes. DDP. DDP forever. Woo!
Casey, might as well, let's go ahead and play the clip. I mean, that crown is Jerry Lawler-esque. What are we talking about here? Why is Jed the GOAT?
What does nose job DDP look like? This man can breathe now, Mike. Do you understand the limitations he's been competing with? He couldn't breathe. That's why his mouth is agape immediately and he's heaving. There's no oxygen intake. He has now gotten that fixed. Robert Whittaker doesn't know what he's in for, baby. He has no idea what's about to happen. This is like in the Fast and the Furious when you put the NOS into the engine and it just explodes. This man can get O2 straight into the lungs. He is going to light the world on fire on Saturday. DDP is about to cement himself a title challenge, and none of y'all see it coming, but I believe in nose job DDP.
I mean, incredible stuff, Jed. I mean, how does this
some of
all
my
feel?
finest work?
Yes, I mean, you had the Juliana Pena one in 2021 that lit the world on fire. I feel like this one's a better pick, honestly. I feel like this one it means a little bit more, does it not? Which one, how do you rank between the two?
I feel like this one's better because I'll level with you guys. I'll be honest. I didn't really believe in the Pena one. I was just saying it. This one was right here in the heart, and I was trying to manifest it, and then it frankly went better than I could have imagined. I did not. He easily won. This was not really a competitive fight. Like, he didn't totally just barnstorm him, but very clearly dominated Robert Whittaker and finished him in the second round, and like wasn't even breathing hard from it. So I didn't think it would go that well for him. It was awesome, and I'm riding a high right now, boys. If Ronda Rousey comes back, which I also said would happen as soon as Nunes retired, I may never do this show again. I may just be like, I'm done. I can't top this.
Yeah, it's been a hell of a run for you, Jed Meshew. And let us introduce Jed's opponent, the man who is in shock with that clip you just saw with his prediction, to the point where he said Dricus Du Plessis has no chance of winning this fight. Could he perhaps give some flowers? He's one of my favorites in the space, shaking his head from the multi-time award-winning Morning Combat from CBS Sports, Showtime, and deep within all of our hearts, Brian Campbell is here. BC, how are you, buddy?
Still in shock that the living legend Robert Whittaker would get knocked out against that man. But, I'm here to teach the kids around the globe a lesson because, like Whitney, RIP, I also believe the children are our future. This is how you take the L right here on national television or the television of the future, the internet, because, every once in a while, a special power arrives on the scene. You can call him Nostradamus. Remember the Alabro. I remember where I was when he picked DDP over Whittaker. So I've got to come back on the show one more time and pay respects to that dime store Kid Rock, second rate Jerry Maguire MMA personality that we know as Jed Meshew, because I am one humbled man right now. Thank you.
Might be the nicest thing anyone's ever said to me on this podcast.
Well, what a great start to the program. We'll talk more about DDP and what happened and the fallout and where this could all lead to in a moment. But we got to talk about Francis Ngannou, guys. We got to talk about Francis Ngannou, the man who most wise-ass fans believed fumbled the bag when he left the UFC before signing a multi-million-dollar, potentially game-changing deal with the PFL. Got pretty much everything, he could ever want as an MMA fighter. He now got the boxing match he wanted as well. It was announced Tuesday that Ngannou will fight Tyson Fury in a 10-round boxing match in October. Jed, I know you talked about this Tuesday, but this thing continues to get some buzz. It's the biggest story of the week in combat sports for sure. Your reaction to this, and I'll put it this way. What word would you use to describe how you feel about this fight being put together?
Oh, I mean, I'm of two minds because most of me is very happy for Francis, and we'll get into that in a second. There's a part of me that's like, man, Francis, you just had to steal my thunder, huh? This is supposed to be my celebratory week, and then he gets to dunk his haters into the core of the earth. Like, oh, you went to PFL. You're afraid of competition. I got all the money in the world, and I get to do whatever the hell I want in PFL. Oh, but you're never going to get the boxing match. Actually, I got Tyson Fury. Suck it, nerds. And he just, their victory lap, the victory lap that Francis and that Eric Nixick get to take now, frankly, I'm more excited to watch that than I am to have my own, because couldn't happen to a better guy. Like I think there are a whole host of things that can be said about this fight, but I don't think it has been said enough that this could not have happened to a better dude. MMA is filled with people that are terrible and that are bad. I was literally having this conversation last night with some friends when they were like, MMA can't be that bad. And off the top of my head, I listed like 12 people who have done horrific things. Like, yeah, actually the sport is filled with awful people. Francis Ngannou ain't one of them. This man's story is inspiring. What he has frankly just managed to will into existence should never possibly have happened. And he keeps upping it. He keeps beating himself. He won when he became the UFC heavyweight champion. Shit, he won when he made it to the UFC, and then he becomes a champion. And then he leaves on his own terms, beating a guy that many people, myself included, picked to beat him with one knee. And now he has made this happen. He is creating dreams out of just sheer willpower. And I couldn't be happier for him. I dearly hope, I don't think any of us are going to even really entertain the idea that he can win, but I dearly hope that he can at least give a decent accounting of himself in one way or another. So people don't come out of this feeling vindicated that, well, he lost, that was a waste of time, because it was never about the fight. It was about getting it and everything else, and about the enormous amount of money he is going to make now, free of the confines of the UFC. So honestly, this is just dope. What a great piece of news.
BC, you have a tremendous podcast that covers a lot of mixed martial arts, but you say it all the time. You're the boxing guy. And now we get in this new attempt at a crossover between MMA and boxing with Fury and Ngannou. We've obviously seen the most infamous one with Floyd Mayweather and Conor McGregor. Are you into this? What was your reaction to all of this?
It really depends on which side of the brain you're asking me to react to. On the human side, on the heart side, everything that Burger King knockoff prediction maker said, and hopefully he can predict, heck, whether you'll perish from this COVID battle by the end of this program, is true. Francis got the bag. He didn't drop it. He'll be making more money in one night, according to his management, than he's made in his entire UFC career. And on top of that, you want to talk about the boyhood dream, Shawn Michaels. Ngannou didn't crawl through hell to get from Africa through a jail in Europe to the streets of Paris, where he's living out of his car, to become UFC champion or the face of PFL Africa. He did it to become the boxing heavyweight champion of the world. So to see him actually in this moment, that personal side of you is like, oh my God, like Jed said, rarely do we get a wholesome moment in combat sports where it always ends badly. And sometimes along the way, it's grimy and gross. And by sometimes, I mean almost every time. The other part of my brain is the MMA side, which says, you know what? This is a spectacle, and I'll tune into it. Francis is going to try to do the impossible against the greatest heavyweight of this era. That's pretty awesome. I don't see how you're not going to find a way to see that, find a way to react to it. But you mentioned the other side of my brain, the one was raised on gas station food. It's true. That's also a boxing guy on that side. This ain't good. This ain't good under these circumstances. I think they had a window here to make this a really special fight, which really could have demanded extra next level crossover viewership. And there's two things they could have done in there. One, mix the two sports together, make this a 4-round glove match. Heck, you could even put in the damn smart cage if you want and try to do, hey, who's really the baddest man on the planet? The other side of it is, why is the WBC heavyweight title not at stake right here? And I get that you can argue it's sort of like, well, who's Francis? He doesn't even have a pro boxing match. I get that too. But, you know, Floyd Mayweather had a historic run going, and his 50th fight was not an exhibition. It was a real fight against day one Conor McGregor, meaning we've done this before. Could you argue, like Kevin Iole did in print, that it's like overblown to do these type of things? Yes, except for Francis. Because he's got that next level power. The fact that the real championship isn't on the line here from a boxing side, it makes this feel very ho-hum, and it ties into the idea that Tyson Fury should not be in Saudi Arabia in a ring with Francis Ngannou. He should be in a ring with unbeaten unified heavyweight champion Alexander Usyk to crown the first 4-belt, and in this case, unbeaten heavyweight champion of boxing. One name, one division, one face, one sport. The things as a boxing fan we never thought could be possible. It could have been possible back in like March. But you got Fury moving the goalposts on Usyk. So now as a boxing fan, we're supposed to get excited about this, only it's meaningless and the title's not at stake. So it takes off any kind of pressure in terms of the meaning. It would be like this, guys. It would be like if our beloved UFC had a chance to make Jones versus Ngannou, and instead of making that, they were trying to make John Jones versus Tyson Fury. Oh, yeah, I think that actually just happened a couple months ago, to be fair. Where was Ioli's column during that one, right? Francis, you got the bag. Congratulations. But this isn't happy news across the board, depending on your combat foundation.
Yeah, and I see where you're coming from, because the MMA community, at least those who want to see MMA fighters get what they deserve, they love this for Francis. Like Jed said, it's not about winning and losing. It's about shutting people up and getting the fight that no one thought you could get. The gimmick fight.
Dunking on the nerds, Mike. It's about dunking on the nerds.
The gimmick promotions is tremendous from Francis Ngannou, by the way. The GIMIK, just incredible stuff, just adds to the story. You know, they love this for Francis. They love him getting the money, sticking it to Dana, all that stuff. And I think most in this community accept, we accept this for the bag he's getting and not much else, because not a lot of people are giving Francis a chance here. Some of the MMA community are into it because they're just stubborn and they just want bad things to happen. But BC, you gave your side from the boxing part of you. How is the boxing community as a whole reacting to this? Like, one would think they'd be kind of pissed about this, right?
Yeah. Half of them are doing what you would expect to say, look, Mayweather-McGregor was a perfect storm of all perfect storms. Each rendition after that, each sequel is going to be bastardized to some degree, and that is certainly in play. The other half of it is exactly what I'm saying, calling out maybe the best heavyweight of this era, probably in 6'9" Tyson Fury, who still unbeaten. Maybe he hasn't fought everybody they wanted to, but you got the fight of your life right in front of you. What the frick are you doing? You want to fight Derek Chisora a third time like you did, our turn of the new year, and nobody cared? We gave you that pass because it was a stay busy, stay active. And here we are. The reaction here is not necessarily a slant against Francis. It's more of a slant against, what are we doing? Why are we doing this? Who's to gain from this? Well, Francis is to gain from it. Fury's going to get a monster payday. Saudi Arabia, in its real aggressive attempt to turn Saudi Arabia into a combat sports destination where people know you're going to get paid more to be there than elsewhere. I felt like Saudi Arabia has this chance, by the way, dual chance. At one, to be a continued theme of sports washing, which is uncomfortable. The other side of it is they have more money than everybody else and are willing to spend it. And that actually bridges the gap in terms of fights that are hard to be made. And we know as boxing fans, most big fights are hard to make. You can bridge that gap with stupid amount of money. Saudi's got that. Usyk just signed with Saudi Arabia's boxing promotion because a lot of people think that's the only way he could actually get Fury. And we're not doing that fight. So, yeah, boxing is sort of like, F off. Get off my timeline. But that's not an indictment against Francis.
Jed, BC brought up a great point, because I was going to bring this up too, because we've seen this before, but not in the same kind of way. If Francis was still the UFC champion, and instead of getting the John Jones fight that we know is right there and that John wants and both guys seem to want in some way, but we got Francis versus Tyson in the UFC, what would your reaction be? Like, what do you think the reaction would be from the MMA community?
We got this fight happening in the UFC.
Like, if we could get Francis John Jones, if it's right there, we're like, yes, we're so close to Francis John Jones. And then Dana does one of his screaming things where it's like, oh yeah, the fight you've all been asking for, the fight everybody's been wanting. Francis Ngannou is going to fight Tyson Fury at Madison Square Garden November 11th. How would you react to that? How do you think the MMA community would react to that?
I mean, they would all just be pretty mad because it's not Francis John Jones. And like, I hate to say this because it just isn't the point. It does not matter. But MMA fans seem to really love to make this point. I mean, George St. Pierre just did it on the MMA Hour yesterday talking about this. Tyson Fury will last less time in the cage with Francis than Francis can last with Fury in the ring. I think that's just like an objectively true fact. But that doesn't mean anything. But MMA fans would be like, well, this is just going to be stupid. And it kind of is. And I'm even sort of with them because Tyson Fury would make like $40 to do it. The point of this, the reason this is an exciting and interesting moment is not because of the fight itself. It's because of the spectacle, and the spectacle not happening inside the UFC for me. Like, I can totally understand if boxing fans aren't into this. Makes the most sense in the world, frankly. For me, this is a feel-good story, and it will be a fun, at least morally fraught sort of conversations to be had around this as it comes. And it'll happen outside of Face the Pain and Baba O'Reilly and the same promotional patina that I've had for like 30 years at this point or whatever. So totally get why boxing fans wouldn't be into this. I saw, honestly, a lot of boxing fans just like be even more angry at Fury that this is what's happening, and kind of wishing or hoping that somehow he steps on the banana peel here. And that would objectively be the funniest thing to happen in sports, certainly since DDP beat Robert Whittaker, but probably in several years, frankly, if somehow Tyson Fury actually did like the 1 in a billion punch landed and Tyson Fury, even if he just gets dropped, he didn't have to lose. If he just gets dropped by Francis and there's like a moment, it would be incredibly funny. And I think everyone could at least acknowledge that.
1 to 100, Jed. What percentage chance does Francis have to win this fight, or even to land that knockdown punch against Tyson Fury?
Whatever the lowest number I can say is. If the number is 1, the number is 1. Like, it's not going to happen. God knows we all love MMA angles. That was such a fun, idiotic narrative heading into the Conor McGregor Floyd fight, as if Floyd doesn't know about angles. Like, gonna show him those MMA angles. He's never seen these before. What? Like, coming in straight forward, not even like behind a feint? No, Francis is gonna get tuned up in there. The hope is that Tyson Fury knows how to carry him in a way that will be compelling for future endeavors. If Tyson, and I said this coming into Floyd and Conor, I don't think it's going to happen for a number of reasons. If Tyson Fury was really, really a savvy businessman, he would take a dive. He, not even betting on himself, he would just fall over once, just one time, and then he gets back up. He can still win the fight, but now you have sold Ngannou as a viable opponent for a rematch, and you could just keep milking that Saudi money for all it's worth and never have to fight Usyk, who might beat you. So that's what I would do if I was in Tyson's corner. I would tell him to do that, but like a realistic chance, Francis has none.
BC, do you give Francis a little bit more of a chance than 1
I
or
do.
0?
Even as the doxing guy, I do. And it does it come down to the old school puncher's chance? It really does. And I'm not going to, expect Francis to be a slick boxer. In fact, having Eric Nixick on Morning Combat in the past and asking about this possibility, we have sort of talked about some of the strategy that they've sort of thrown around. Is it better for Francis to just be as unorthodox and dangerous as possible? It probably will be. Now, that doesn't mean he'll be able to carry that stamina since they're a little bit different in that regard. And Conor faded badly late against Floyd. But look, 1%, no. I'll give him a 10% chance because, again, the only reason I think in general, aside from the Francis feel-good story, and I don't want to dismiss that, that's a big part of all of us accepting this curiosity fight to some level. It's the fact that if you're going to go back to the well of boxer versus MMA fighter, and the boxer isn't like way too old, so that's the way you're going to bridge the gap of competition. And in this case, disappointingly, it's boxing rules, but again, not the title on the line. If anybody has more than a 1% chance, let's be fair, it is Francis Ngannou. Now, I understand ahead of Maymac that Dana spit into every microphone, and a lot of us did too, saying, okay, no one's actually picking Conor, but Conor does have real power, right? One-punch power in MMA. What happens if he hits Floyd clean? Well, he actually did. He hit Floyd with an uppercut to the throat from close range in round one. Only that adjustment didn't work out well for Conor. And by that adjustment, I mean going from an MMA stance into a boxing one with much heavier padded gloves and the shifting of weight. Conor was unable to produce power in that case. Ngannou, from everyone I've talked to, that won't be an issue. Does that mean he wins or you're giving him a big chance? No. And Jed nailed it on the idea of, well, the craziest thing, weirdest thing that could happen is if Fury gets, knocked out for taking this big money chance here. It's not really a chance. Again, there's no title on the line. And as of right now, they're not telling us that, people have put it together, whether it's actually going to be an actual fight. Yeah, there'll be boxing judges. It'll be 10 rounds, but I don't know if it'll be on everyone's record. If it's not, all Fury does if he loses, as Jed, threw out there, is gain another big money rematch and delay this Usyk fight. And maybe Fury is doing the old school boxing move of waiting out the quicker opponent until he gets a little bit older. And anyone that doesn't follow boxing, Usyk's actually into his late 30s now because he had such a big amateur career. That could be the case. And I don't expect Fury to come out and tell boxing fans, hey, don't worry, guys, still going to fight Usyk on the other end. Don't get mad at me. It's just disappointing altogether. But one thing no one's talking about, Top Rank is the co-promoter in boxing of Tyson Fury, along with Frank Warren in the UK. Top Rank did put out a press release that this fight's happening, and they put that weird language in there that said, don't worry, guys, both fighters will go toe-to-toe in the center of the ring and settle this. What pay-per-view outfit is putting this on? I say that because Top Rank has an exclusive contract in the States with ESPN. You're going to have an ESPN Plus, victory lap party of how you escape a UFC contract on ESPN? I don't think so. I think it's not a coincidence.
I don't know, man.
Announce the distribution partner here. If Dana's going to pick up that phone and dial Disney for anything, it's going to be this one. Why? Why is Dana being so salty toward Francis? Because at the end of the day, is Dana the kind of guy that doesn't, give up grudges easily? Yes. But even more than that, Francis cannot succeed in this situation, or it continues to show that there's a chance for life outside of the UFC, that there's a potential roadmap. Now, that roadmap is made harder by the fact that after Francis left, UFC made those contracts even more draconian to keep people locked in longer with the sunset clause and all that. But still, if Francis succeeds, Dana loses. You think this is going to end up on ESPN Plus pay-per-view? I don't.
I mean,
what do you think, Jen?
You say Francis can pick up the phone. What about old Donnie Davis just making a call from Francis's side of the thing? Dana White, you want to pull the UFC off? Well, PFL will leave if you refuse to promote this. Who's ESPN Plus going to side with, my man? I think we all know the answer to that.
Well, just threaten to put a graphic together and they'll be on ESPN Plus pay-per-view in a heartbeat. I mean, no one makes more noise with a graphic than Don Davis does. We've learned that on this program.
But heck,
or Saudi Arabia will just pay them more money and be like, make it happen. Just don't care.
You know what the only good thing about this, guys, this whole Francis thing for UFC fans is? It's making really big fights that have been lingering and not getting signed. It's suddenly aligning them. Ariel puts out to the world that this fight is intimate. Guess what happens next? Oh, hey, guys, Jones is really going to fight Stipe at MSG. It's on. And I don't know if anyone saw Michael Chandler's Christmas tree emoji cryptic
20
tweet.
minutes after this news dropped.
Look, Francis, keep going, brother, because if you keep pushing the envelope, we'll finally get all the fights we were promised from the beginning, like you versus John.
Love it.
Maybe. Maybe.
I mean, that would actually be the best thing if Francis comes out of this and is like, and I'm now signing a deal to box Deontay Wilder. Your move, Dana. See, all right, Izzy DDP, Jan 1st in South Africa. Fine. Just
I mean,
great.
he's just played this masterfully from Jump Street. So that is Ngannou Fury. We'll see how this all plays out over the next several months. We will move on to what happened this past Saturday because a lot happened this past Saturday. Point for round one goes to the boxing guy, BC, 1-0. Jed, you're wearing a damn crown. You got the victory lap. You can't get everything.
True.
You can't have the cake and eat it too. So real kings and real champions win through adversity, and you have some now. So let's talk UFC 290 because BC, this was a hell of a card. We talked about how solid it was on paper, hardcore fans delight, and this exceeded expectations for most people. This is one of those cards where if you bought it and you spent the $85, you were very happy you did, and if you didn't, I think you regretted it. So just BC, how good was this card? How good was this card? Was this about just expectations? Is this so good because the rest of the calendar year has been awful, or is this just a tremendous fight card on its own?
Hey, heck, the answer is yes to everything you just said, right? If you were like me and you were extra critical of UFC matchmaking and the larger sort of corporate reputation and communication this calendar year, this was the oasis in the desert, quite literally, right? This is what a major in the UFC can feel like. I know I was critical, even though a lot of people love this card. Jed gave it an A on paper. I wasn't as willing to because there was a lot of the potential for one-sided matchups with stars. Some of that broke apart, but what do we get? We got the full power of what can happen on a UFC night where it feels big. You're in a packed arena. It's, again, I mean, this is arguably the biggest card of the year in terms of the expectations. Well, it over-delivered. If you just want to compare this to the greatest pay-per-views in UFC history of this, modern era, it stands up very well there too, whether you love 100, 116, 205, 217, me 236 in Atlanta with that great main and co-main event at the end there that changed my life in so many ways. Whatever you want to compare it to, this fight had that magic, that injection that anything was possible. You had early knockout, Bo Nickel quick finish, Robbie Lawler perfect retirement, crazy upset by DDP, one after another, that even though I really enjoyed the main event, we all have that same sentiment. It was arguably one of the worst fights on this card. This shows you again, if you are on the crying critical end like I was of, hey, UFC, you are kind of going in the wrong direction and no one's really raising their hand. This was a, hey, BC, shut the hell up moment. We still got it. This is what we're capable of. This is a night you will not forget. You'll remember where you were and what it felt like. I hope this kicks down the door of momentum into the second half. Obviously, I'm sure we're going to talk about this Saturday's fight night card. That might be the worst card of all time. But short of that, I'll give them a hall pass. Why? Because we're coming off one of the best cards I've ever seen. And we have 2 pay-per-views this month, and the second one is pretty damn badass, July 29th. So 10 out of a 10, if there's any other evidence, and I know 290 is a special card, but if there's any other evidence to get the frick out of the Apex and get back into the live arena all the time, no matter if you have a deep card or not, it's 290. Why? Because how do you make that special magic that was in the air? It takes hungry fighters willing to break out in big moments. It takes a crowd that is just going nuts. Now, this was a different crowd, right? This Mouth of Teeth had different shaped ones. We had like Mel Gibson and Guy Fieri and Donald Trump. I mean, it looked like an absolute mess there, but it felt big and they over-delivered. Stop the Apex madness. Zuck can rent it out off-season all he wants. Let's bang, Tui. This is how you get down. 290, special time in this job. I loved it. I was wrong. Thank you.
Well said. Jed, we have been preaching since October, since UFC 280. We've been a 3-word mantra, not just for fighters, but for like anybody. Do the thing. And to me, this was the UFC doing the thing. They did the thing. The fights were great. It seemed like they tried. It seemed like they put more effort into things. Case in point, the Robbie Lawler retirement, just doing the thing. They did the thing. It took them all friggin' week to do it. But once we got to Saturday, they put the foot on the gas and they did the damn thing. Jed, how good was this card?
was the best card in recent memory. Um, I I don't want to say it's the best card of all time because there are a number of good contenders. BC laid out a few, and it's so fresh that just sort of like reeks of being prisoner of the moment. But I think looking back on this will get consideration in future years as one of the best cards ever. I personally think it's the best International Fight Week event ever. We talked about that on a ranking show this week, and this one for me, I think will, again, it's very new, but you got just look at all the things you got. You got two title fights. One of them, the main event, all-time great fighter puts on a near perfect performance. You get a fight of the year contender in the co-main event and a new champion crowned with that like really heart-wrenching and kind of affecting moment at the end, talking about his dad, "Are you proud of me now?" You get another fight of the year contender a little further down the main card. You get one of the biggest upsets in recent history with DDP, and then all of that comes after that. You get the Robbie Lawler retirement, which is the best retirement in the history of this sport. And like when BC says this can be a card you'll remember for the rest of your life, like that's 1,000% true. And the Robbie Lawler moment is why for me, like there will come a time when I'll probably forget about the Volkanovski performance, or even as great as the fight was, the Pantoja Moreno fight. Like I won't remember the particulars. I will remember forever Robbie Lawler's retirement and how everything worked and fit together to lead to one of the best moments this sport has ever seen. And on top of that, you got 4 1-minute finishes. Like that's a modern UFC record. And it's an incredible card from top to bottom. I'm going to echo a lot of the things that the BC said, so I don't need to repeat them. But honestly, with a couple of days of hindsight and looking back on it, my biggest takeaway and there are two, and they're interrelated, and it's that when we shit talk the UFC, this is why. Because this is what they are capable of. And you can't have an event like this every week. It's simply not going to be that way. Not everything is going to break right. Not all the fights are going to be great. But if you set out and create card after card that like they have, where the max is forgettable, where if everything goes right and they get super lucky and the card over delivers, it is still going to be a forgettable event, then you're just going to get a litany of forgettable events. But when you put together cards like this, cards that I gave an A beforehand because of what it could be, yes, all of it could have turned to shit, could have been a stinker of a card. That happens. But if you don't give it an opportunity to succeed, if you don't create opportunities for big moments, you'll never have them. And the UFC is fully capable of doing it, and they just don't. And that's why we talk shit about them. And we'll get to this weekend. This weekend is the exact antithesis of this. It cannot succeed by almost any definition. And so the big takeaway is that, and the second one, and again, it's interrelated, is I don't think this isn't going to be a sea change moment. The UFC isn't going to look at this and all of the great press and stuff and say, we should try a little harder, guys. It's pretty cool. Like that's just not what they're going to do. Money is the driving factor. I do hope that they can at least look at Robbie Lawler and the retirement and the universal love that has, like, not a single person has a bad thing to say about it. Everybody is so thrilled with how that went and what that meant for particularly old school fans, that I hope that they can look at this and say, man, we got to do this more. We got to do this better. We have to put our legends in positions to succeed, and they still have to do it. They got to go out and win the fight, but we got to at least make it an opportunity for them to go out on a high and for us to do this sort of big emotional moment for them. Cause it's that one is a pretty low ask, I think. And I hope that if they take nothing from this event else, they take that and say, okay, when the next guy comes up, when Jim Miller retires at UFC 400, let's give him a fight that he can win, and let's make it special, because it should be for some guys in this sport.
I love everything you just said there. Jed, you talked about Alexander Volkanovski, near perfect game. Does it again, makes it look incredibly easy against Yair Rodriguez. We all felt like if someone was going to, like, Volk could win the fight, but he's probably not going to win the war when you fight Yair. That's just what he does to people. And this didn't happen here. This is pillar to post. Volk got takedowns early and often, and Yair just could not get anything going. And when he had any moment, Volk just punched him in the face really hard, and the fight was over shortly thereafter. These last 3 title defenses, Jed, Zombie, the Holloway one, and this one, these are 3 of the all-time best title defense. Like a run like this, can you think of anybody who has put together 3 consecutive title defenses this near perfect in a row like this?
I mean, most of I'm sure John Jones's run, certainly during that early stretch was also pretty immaculate. Very small quibble. I'm just gonna say that the Yair and Holloway are not of the same quality as Zombie, just because of where Zombie is in his career. But yeah, I mean, dude was flawless. Got takedowns, controlled the range the entire time. Yair got comfortable for about 35 seconds in that 3rd round, and then as soon as he got comfortable, Volk was like, "Well, we're done with that. Boop, you're going to fall over and be done now." I mean, it just no perfect performance. Like, I don't personally have him ranked as the top pound fighter in the world. If you do, I have no issue with it, because I've said this many times this past week, and certainly the lead up. I think there is a actually very credible argument that Alexander Volkanovski is the best fighter that we have ever seen set foot in a cage, and he continues to perform like that. And there's nothing to say other than, holy shit, man! Like, Yair could have been a problem, and he super wasn't. That's damn impressive.
BC, how do you grade Volk's performance, and what was your biggest takeaway from it?
I mean, A++ without question. And I don't even like Jed downplaying what that Korean Zombie title defense was in this run, only from the standpoint that we didn't consider Volkanovski a finisher before that. In fact, part of me being slow to come around to the idea that Volk isn't just a great active champion, but potentially the kind of stuff we're trying to say about him now, like maybe the GOAT featherweight, maybe knocking on the door of immortality. I would say, okay, well, he's very good. He's smart. He can set these traps, but can he go in there and finish guys? What happens if, he faces legitimate adversity? Well, look, he faced legitimate adversity against Ortega and showed incredible character and poise. And then he went in there against Korean Zombie and beat the freaking crap out of him. And if you look at history, the only people that do that outside of that miraculous Yair elbow in the final second is basically like Jose Aldo and guys of that ilk, right? So I think that was actually important in part of this current evolving narrative around Volkanovski, is that he's not only just getting better, he has pretty much raised every category of his fighting game, even with the limitations of his height in some matchups, to like elite video game level across the board. He's not a sum of his parts type of guy. He's not a guy who, okay, man, he's a wizard out there. He's tough to hit. But if the chips get down, what's he going to do? He's going to thrive, because as Jed mentioned, he's like a near perfect fighter. And the only time I've seen near perfect runs, right, of great fighters, but who is a near perfect fighter in MMA history? Demetrius Johnson. I'm getting Demetrius Johnson vibes through my screen from Volk. And at 34, and Luke Thomas loves this freaking stat, that 35 and over below welterweight, you're basically dead on sight if you want to win a UFC title fight. At 34, Volkanovski is getting better,
Could still
guys.
be true.
Like, holy shit. Yeah, he could hit a wall and fall off, meaning going from super, super elite down to just regular elite at any point. But I know he did a face-off with Ilia Topuria cage side. I could not be banging the drum more to get him back in there against Makhachev, because we have a window here for him literally to max out greatness on a level that few have seen across the board. Go back up to 55. That first fight was a classic. You could have argued it either way. If you win that, you really are going to start pushing those other big names down below you and stepping on them to get to the very top of the all-time rankings. Rare do we get to talk about that as a fighter. I felt like Izzy before the Blachowicz loss was starting to sniff and open that door a bit. Obviously, John Jones, we felt that a long way coming. But Volk, you got a window here to continue this magic and do things that haven't been done before, but maybe haven't been done across this level with this level of class in every category. Oh, and you also have the intangibles. Look, I don't like post-shaved head Volkanovski as much as Jed. He looks like a weird cosplaying pirate, but that freaking pirate's unbelievable. And he's already passed Jose Aldo in the featherweight rankings, despite what Jed tells you. Hey, Jed, your guy Aldo's been stopped 3 times in featherweight title fights in the UFC. This guy Volkanovski's undefeated all time in this weight class, and they're not sniffing him. And the only people that have done are all-time freaking greats, and he beat Max 3 times. Good freaking Lord, this guy, right? I mean, you can take the Burger King crown off already, okay? We've given you the flowers here, guy. Thank you very much.
No. It stays as I am the king. I will not be engaging in the GOAT talk. I have come up with a new rule, which I think is pretty justified in that you don't get to be involved in the GOAT talk until you're done. When you're retired, then absolutely. And then let's see, because it is a factual truth that Jose Aldo got stopped 3 times in featherweight title fights. That is absolutely true. He's done fighting, and now we know. If he had retired when he hadn't lost, the conversation around him is just wildly different. And you go back in history and you look at that, and it's fighters who were ubiquitous all-time greats, BJ Penn, Fedor Emelianenko, get downplayed because they keep fighting past their best years and start to suffer losses. Volk may never lose again. I certainly cannot say that he will. He's an unbelievable fighter. Or he does turn 35 in like 3 months, and maybe the wall is real. The magic wall that Luke Thomas talks about is real, and Ilia Topuria knocks him out. And then he tries to get it back, and then suddenly he's older and he's slower, and he sticks around for 4 more years, and he takes 5 losses, and then everybody who's like unquestioned blah can have all the arguments thrown back at him. So just not going to engage in any GOAT talks until somebody is retired, at which point then they can be a viable thing. But until we can look at the totality, because half of the arguments come from that guy lost 13 seconds. It's just a nonsense argument. I couldn't disagree more with BC about the Makhachev fight thing either. Like, some people are pushing it, and that's fine. But I said this, I think last week, I've said it a ton. You're talking about him chasing all-time greatness to put people behind him by going up and win a second belt. Fuck that, man. Like, that is just not as important to me as winning multiple title defenses. Like, he has 5. That is an awesome number. Like, that's already elite status. But there are 2 people in history who have double-digit title defenses. There are like 12 multi-division champions. There are like 4 people that have even gotten up to 7+ title defenses. Volk can do that. And he said it himself in the post-fight. He's knocking on the door of some of these records. He wants to pursue them. Pursue those things. Like, Ilia Topuria is ready-made. Like, that is the most obvious next fight. You do that one, and then I'll even say that if you beat Topuria, if nothing else happens in the next 6 months, you've done a pretty good job of cleaning out most of the contenders. There's not like a really clear next opponent for you unless something impressive happens. Maybe then you can go fight Makhachev while you wait for Arnold Allen or Movsar Evloev or somebody else to get wins that are relevant. But just go fight Topuria, man. Get that W, because you seem to think it's going to happen very easily. So do it. Keep stacking those wins. Build your legacy that way, because I fucking guarantee you, if you go up and you beat Makhachev, that will be unbelievable. Like, nobody will take that away from you. But in 20 years, you'll get some jackass who comes over from boxing and can just look at a wiki page and be like, but he lost to Makhachev, and then he lost a couple of times at the end of his career. Whereas instead, you could just be like, man, he defended his title 12 times. That was incredible. Nobody else has ever done that. Like, do that thing, because if you have it in you, I want to see it. And you might have it in you. You're damn good, dude. Like, beat Topuria, and then we can talk about Makhachev.
So you want him to go win this title defense thing, which is really the only thing I feel Jose really has as a solid argument for staying the featherweight GOAT. Yet it was a different era, as you tried to insinuate last time we had this debate, which means as these eras continue to evolve, the sport's only 30 years old. The eras get better. Volkanovski's fighting in a better era than Jose was. History continues to prove to that. I mean, he's not out there defending against like Patrick Cote and Travis Lutter, right? Like all the great champions. It depends on the division and the stacked era that you're in. Volkanovski's in a freaking killer era. And before you start giving the take
is Sugar Ray Leonard dog shit because he beat the best dudes he can beat at the time? No, you can only beat the dudes you can fight, man.
Listen, King, you'll have your moment again in a second, okay? What I'm saying is you can't do the argument about the losses at the end of the career when talking about Jose Aldo. You want to talk about BJ Penn and the Lava Shack parking lot? Yeah, that's freaking sad. I'm talking about him being stopped for the title against Conor McGregor when he's at the peak of his absolute prime, and twice against Max Holloway when he's, 30 years old. I'm not talking about at the end of the day. Jose Aldo doesn't have that career that has all these stacked losses at the end. Because he went down to an even tougher weight class and got to this title level. He's a freaking great. He's just not better on paper right now, in my opinion, than Volkanovski. So save me with if he would have retired right at the peak. First of all, nobody does that outside of basically Habib, okay? Joe Calzaghe did in boxing, but at the end, nobody does that. Jose Aldo.
Yep. You are by definition projecting the next 5 years of Volkanovski's career. Volkanovski could be at his peak right now and then lose his next 4 fights. You are just saying he's not going to, and he might not. We can have that conversation when it's all said and done. Because the facts are known.
Maximize it now. Go for the history now.
1,000%. Defend your belt now.
The history is not 4 more title defenses against, let's hope the next killer comes sprouting out between those legs. We need another. No, that's not it. You go after the guys in the current pound for pound top 10. And the other guy right there with him, 1 and 2, is Makhachev. Some people thought he beat him already. Go back in there and prove us wrong again. Dude, that's the quickest way to all-time greatness, the fame and money that Volk wants. The window is open. Luke Thomas is on the other side of it with all of his freaking stats. He's going to close it on you. Hey, I'll tell you what, though. If Volk can find a way to get a saggy nipple, he may be able to push through that 35 and older stat line, just so you know. Because Guy knows it all right? Guy.
Just going to let that one sit.
All right. That is a perfect time to move on to the rest of this card. The point for round 2 goes to the man who didn't say saggy nipple, Jed Meshew. It's 1-1.
BC just heaving it at the end. Don't want it.
Well played.
Don't want the point.
Well played. All right. Well, we mentioned it, and you talked about it, Jed, because when we look back on this card 10 years from now, Pantoja winning the flyweight title is probably not anything we're really going to be talking about. It's not a huge storyline, but the fight with Brandon Moreno was incredible. And you have the crown on. You made a compelling case heading into last week's show, or in the beginning of last week's show, that the best fight the UFC could put together on paper could actually have been this fight between Pantoja and Brandon Moreno. And boy, oh boy, did this thing deliver, Jed Meshew. Your thoughts on your prediction, how this fight played out, and Ali Pants becoming the UFC flyweight champion of the world.
I would like everyone to forget anything I may have said about the Dan Hooker Jalen Turner fight because it's not important. But man, I had some good bangers last week for sure. As that fight was unfolding, I was like, man, I said that I thought that this probably wasn't the best fight that could be done on paper, but has a case and is one of the ones I would be the most excited for the UFC to make. But it had over delivered. I mean, that fight was just incredible. We were watching it live on the watch party. I thought Pantoja was probably cooked after round 2. His whole body language had changed and Moreno was starting to get his game going. And then look, it's really simplistic to say that he wanted it more because it's not fully true, but he also just kind of wanted it more. He just sort of kept willing himself forward and willing himself into these positions to create the scrambles, get the back control, get the takedowns. When Moreno was tagging him on the feet, I think like you said, this probably isn't a fight that we're going to remember for all time or whatever, unless this is the start of a long, Pantoja title reign. Maybe we'll look back on it, but this is an unbelievable performance, an unbelievable fight. And I will remember hauntingly his post-fight speech, "Are you proud of me, Dad? Now, Dad," is one of the saddest things that I've ever felt in mixed martial arts. And so that's probably going to stick with me for a while. And then hearing him talk about it on the MMA Hour this week and sort of where he's at and what that meant to him, and the fact that he was driving for Uber Eats a couple of fights ago, how can you not just be thrilled with with what happened for Ali Pants this past weekend. Really excited for, frankly, whoever he defends against. If it's Brandon Royval, that fight the first time was super fun, and I will absolutely sign up for it again. If they somehow slot Moreno back in there for a fourth one, which I don't think they will, but you never know. Obviously, I'll watch that again. If Figgy Smalls gets the call up, even if it's Amir Albazi, because Alejandro Pantoja is one of the most exciting guys currently in mixed martial arts. And so I am thrilled that he is the champion of this weight class, because that by definition, he is just going to make every fight super fun and should be good for however long this reign lasts.
BC, what did you think? Pantoja, to me, at certain points of this fight, I was like, this guy's not human. Looked like he was tired.
Exactly.
Looked like he was gassing. He was just getting hit over and over again. We're like, oh, he's about to go down. And then he just got better and somehow got stronger, and his will was unbelievable. What a performance from this guy, BC.
Yeah, I got to push back on what Jed said, where, even though, look, he again had a Nostradamus moment saying this would be the fight of the night. And I sort of, or this would be the fight we'd most remember, the one he's most excited for on paper. Well, it turns out he was right on there, but he's wrong to say that we somehow won't remember this specifically. This is the best fight in flyweight history. I really believe that. And I was thinking back in my head, and there's been so many, especially in this post-Cejudo era with Mick Maynard matching all these guys. There's so much parity and violence. I love the first Davidson Figueiredo fight versus Moreno. That was my favorite. I really love the second half of that Joe Benavidez Cejudo one from a few years back. But this one had everything. And when you mentioned that Pantoja was willing to sort of just pour it out, like, they're both going to be different from this fight. They both went in there with a next level will. Like, what separates great action fights? How can you say, BC, that this is the greatest flyweight title fight, maybe greatest flyweight fight we've seen in the UFC here? Because those guys had second, third, and fourth level adjustments and second win, third win, fourth win, where they were really ready to pour out their entire career. Like, we hate when people say, I'm willing to die in the cage, because it reminds us how realistic the threat and danger level is in this sport. But they were both took off years off of their career in one night. And for Pantoja to win this basically on heart and will alone, and then deliver the father of mine speech. I mean, we already said it on this show. It's so rare in this modern era, especially in MMA, to get these like great feel-good stories that seep through. I don't even think UFC and their marketing promotion, jump on these like they could. And we're on a pretty good run here when you consider everything from Rose yelling, I'm the best after that comeback win, to Pena's unbelievable upset, which was the triumph of the human spirit, to Nunes winning back the title and then retiring on her own terms. Like, we're getting a bunch of these lately, Robbie Lawler including on that same night. And to continue and to see Pantoja just pour out his heart and soul for that moment, to justify it to himself that he was ever worthy of trying this, to justify it to the fact that financially these guys aren't getting paid what they deserve. And as you talked about, this guy was doing like regular odd man, everyday jobs, driving Uber or whatever before this. Now, because he risked it all, we have a moment we'll never forget, a fight we'll never forget. And I think the only travesty right now would be to run back the Moreno fight again and do it quickly. Not only do both of these guys need some legitimate time off, Pantoja needs a long victory lap around Brazil. Moreno has been in too many wars in succession, and to go from a 4-pack of fights against Figueiredo instantly into a 4-pack of fights in a lot of ways against Pantoja, even though 2 happened a while ago, you do start to ask yourself, would we continue to force those just for the larger narrative of this great Mexican fighter in Moreno, part of this great Mexican era? Unfortunately, Saturday, the curse of Aldana continued to make its way around across Mexico as the champions fell in front of us and the pressure's on Grasso in September. But it is time to get off of Moreno for a second, let him heal up. He's been through so many crazy blood and guts wars. And how about this division post-Cejudo? It's all parody, all violence. You're never going to be right on your picks, except for Jed saying this would be the fight. It was, Jed. I hope you remember it, dirt hole.
I think BC might be the first person to ever call Juliana Pena winning the belt a feel-good moment. That is not how I would qualify that for anybody.
She sure didn't win it on skill that night, okay? She won it on will,
well,
and
no.
That's why, okay?
She definitely did do that, but I don't think a lot of people were like, what a triumph of the human spirit. We're so happy, Julia.
Luke Thomas was, okay? Thank you.
That was a good moment. what happened after that and since then has not been great. But BC, a moment we will remember, and we started the show with this, Dricus Du Plessis beat Robert Whittaker. Ran him over. This was not a flash fluky KO. He convincingly won this fight. And then he had the face-off with Israel Adesanya, and it was uncomfortable to most. Others, and it's so interesting when we bring up these things, because if this happened in any other sport, this is on SportsCenter for a week, 2 weeks. That's all we're talking about. It's on First Take. It's everywhere. But because this is the UFC, because this is Dana White running the show, this is the age-old adage in combat sports. Well, it's the fight game, damn it. There's 700 maniacs, and they say a bunch of crazy shit, blah, 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 blah.
Who gives
What
a
did you
shit?
think of, what did you think of this face-off and how it played out, BC?
All right, well, we got two separate questions within here. The DDP win, look, if I'm going to give the flowers to Jed for making the bold-as-shit prediction, and I know Aaron Bronster, by the way, who I love, is trying to claim the same thing. Aaron, you picked up knockout with plus money in your betting segment. That's different than Jed putting his reputation on the line, if he had one to begin with. But here's the point. DDP, you get our flowers. And the same question I have to go back and ask people like Abron and Jed, what did you see that we didn't see? And I think that because we didn't see this before, unless it was your prediction that he would come in and do exactly what he did, overwhelm Whittaker, use the size, use the power, then I guess you were right. But to get to that point, as he said himself after the fight, he had to change who he was as a fighter, which means to be patient, poised, technical, switching stances, using incredible IQ and game plan and adjustments. This was not the guy the last few fights who, even though he had convincing cleanup wins over Brunson and Till, good names, I didn't think he had done enough to get to this point, because I didn't think he had that in him against the living legend Robert Whittaker, who, as DDP said himself, that footwork's off the charts, the hand speed, the technique, the setup, all of that was real. But it wasn't just that DDP is the biggest middleweight we've ever seen, which actually might be true here. It was the way that he combined all of that together with the kind of craft and poise that, he went from canned beer to craft ale, like right there in front of our eyes. So yeah, let's send a giant bouquet to South Africa. Consequently, on the other side of it is that face-to-face. The good is that hatred was real between them, and you can keep showing that. By the way, UFC Twitter, not even bleeping out the N-words. They're like, yeah, we don't police that stuff. These are fighters. It's a fight game. But it's going to work. It's going to get people massively behind this fight that I didn't want. And the reason why I didn't want it is because I didn't think DDP was good enough, but I also didn't want a fight thing that's sort of built upon race. But I do think we should examine what actually happened in that cage. It's not lost on me what the deeper level potentially of the DDP comments might come across and mean to people about this whole idea of, who's the real African champ, which is not really what he said, right? But I know you can go back and watch what DDP said and watch the corrections he made to it after. And even though he wasn't outright racist, you could try to connect dots deeper. You can go deep in the history of Africa and colonialism. You can go all down there you want. I thought Izzy's actual reaction in the cage was not good, not good for peace, just not good across the board. It will help the fight because it's injection of real fervor and spirit there, but it only keeps perpetuating the idea that this is a white versus black in 2023 fight with real race on the line, when the reality might actually be, go back to Izzy's interviews ahead of the first Whittaker fight, when that's all he talked about, that Whittaker's not the real New Zealand fighter because he moved away. Go back to Leon Edwards saying that about Bisping, that you're not the real UK champ because you moved to California in the US and became a champ there. I'm not here to say DDP's comments are all on the up and up. I don't know. I don't know the heart of the man. I'm here to say that I didn't like Adesanya's escalative reaction. And I do think we need to investigate a little bit more, like what he said in the past and what DDP's saying. Is it that different? Well, if DDP is a huge racist behind the scenes and I don't know about it, it might be. But maybe we can pull back on the race stuff a bit and just focus on this instead, that this is now a very viable fight, and DDP is proving that he's a bigger live dog than I ever would have thought. I didn't think I wanted this fight. I didn't think I needed it. I want Izzy at 205. I can shut up. I was wrong again. This is going to be something, and we're all going to tune in.
Jed, what did you make of this face-to-face? It wasn't for everybody. We had to react to it on live YouTube during the freaking watch party. I'm like, oh, there's Izzy. Wow, I wonder what he's going to say. I'll tell you everything he's about to say. No, I'm not. I'm not
Can't
telling
do
you
that.
anything that he said. So
Can't do that.
nope, couldn't do that. So look, the UFC is going to take that and they're going to put in every promotional video when this fight actually gets made. That is going to be monstrous on how they push this fight. But what did you make of the whole face-to-face there?
First, I just want to say props to DDP because I echo some of what BC said there, and that this is now the biggest fight the UFC can put together. Like the one I'd be the most interested in, because I really didn't think he had much chance against Izzy, and now coming off that performance against Whittaker, where it's not just that he beat Whittaker, which is obviously unbelievable. It's how he did it and the way he looked and the improvements he showed. He's like super live to beat Izzy. I don't know if I'll pick him, but he is very much in play to do that. So that fight is incredibly compelling now. So, and you just got to take your hat off to the man, and you got to take your hat off to him as well for the post fight. Like BC, I am not standing by anything that DDP has said. I think that it is incredibly naive to think that he doesn't know what he is saying when he says, I'm going to be the first African champion to bring a belt back to Africa. One, other champions have brought belts back to Africa. And two, I think he just knows what's going on. You would have to be the most oblivious person in the world to not understand that. And as a white man in South Africa, I suspect that he is not the most oblivious person in the world. That being said, he handled Saturday so much better than Izzy did. Like, we talked about it on the post fight. I loved his little slide jab when Rogan was like, and here, the best middleweight in the world. He's like, I don't know about that. And then Izzy, like, look, I'm not in Israel Adesanya's head. I cannot say this with absolute certainty, but it feels pretty easy to just say Izzy was trying to bait him into saying the N-word. He was just repeatedly screaming at him and trying to bait him into saying something bad so he could have the moral high ground. Because, like BC pointed out, Izzy basically did something very similar. It's not as fraught, with the racial complications as DDP say, essentially calling 3 black African champions not African. But he did straight up tell Robert Whittaker that you're not New Zealand, like you're not Kiwi, you're Australian, fuck off. So very, very similar. And I think he's just trying to bait DDP into saying something, trying to get some sort of a moral high ground because this rubs him the wrong way. And again, I think it's justified for Izzy to be upset by the comments from DDP. But he didn't handle it super well, and Du Plessis just essentially no-selling him, just being like, whatever, stop, like, you're insane, and just walking away. Like, that's how you handle that. If that's their first true interaction together, DDP 10-8 Izzy right there. And we'll see. I think we're going to get a lot more of this sort of interplay between these two. Doesn't seem like either man is backing down from the statements that they are making. DDP continues to repeat that he never said that he was the only African champion, despite saying that functionally. And Izzy is probably just going to hammer home on the 23andMe line, which is awful, just super, super bad. But Izzy likes to repeat super bad lines. Cue the Elsa clip. So it's going to be ugly in a lot of ways, but the end result is going to be a fight that kicks ass. And so I kind of don't care. Like, it's probably good in some regards that this is going to force MMA fans to at least reckon on some level with extremely complex, racial and sociopolitical issues. But yeah, don't really care. It's fine. I've seen a lot of worse things happen in this sport. That was a bit cringy, but this fight's going to rule, and that's the most important thing.
All right, real quick before we move on to, the topic everybody's here for, which is UFC Vegas 77. Will this be the next fight for Israel Adesanya, BC? Because as much as, look, doing this in Sydney would be brilliant, but I kind of wish the Sydney card was in November. Then we could give it some time, let it happen. But this Sydney card has to have Adesanya on it. It just has to. Otherwise, what the hell are we doing here? And it's almost like unfair to the fans to have DDP like rush back into camp just to get another fight. So could the UFC just be like, dude, Izzy, we just need you to fight. Like, go fight Sean Strickland and then go fight DDP after? Or do we just do everything in our power to get DDP ready 8 weeks from now. We'll just rush this thing out there.
Let me inform you, if you don't follow boxing on the regular, there's a term we have. Bob Arum once voiced it. It's called marinate. We marinate way too much in boxing, and then the whole falls through. Bob Arum still tried to marinate Yuriorkis Gamboa against Juanma Lopez in a fight that never ended up happening because they both got knocked out, right? Like right after. It's like, no, you have a chance to make that fight. You have a window. Again, the best thing that happened is DDP didn't really take any damage outside of some quick step jabs from Whittaker and, some early action there. He would turn it around. Of course, you would expect him to. This is the moment of his life. You have a red hot fight and feud here. You have to come right back at it and cash it in. If DDP had, won on a cut, or he had won on a boring decision that you argue the other way, it would have so much less juice. He went in there and knocked out Robert Whittaker. Like, holy shit. You got to do it, and you got to do it next, and you got to do it now. And yeah, go down to Sydney and do it. Let's make this a monster event.
Jed, do you think that's what happens? Or do you think he fights Strickland and then DDP gets the winner?
I agree with 80% of what Brian Campbell said, but his end result is still a fail. You just don't do this in Sydney, man. I agree. This is the next fight. Don't do Sean Strickland. Banana peels happen. I think Izzy would win that fight, but it would distract from the moment. Like, yeah, you're putting on a card in Sydney. I know you want it to be a pay-per-view. The weekend after you're having a rematch of the flyweight title, you can just move that to a pay-per-view and say F it. And this Sydney can be a fight night card that'll be fun, like a London card or whatever. If I'm DDP, I wouldn't take this fight. Just be like, no, it's too quick. I need to heal up a little bit. He has the leverage right now. The UFC might give, Izzy somebody else to fight, but his DDP's next fight is for the belt. No one will.
100%. Definitely.
So he can just say, guys, I'm not ready. And frankly, I don't think the UFC should try and shotgun this thing. I don't, BC says marinade like it's a bad thing, but if you don't marinate your chicken, it tastes like dry, bland bullshit. But you look at BC, he probably eats dry, bland bullshit. Man probably puts raisins in his potato salad. So we need to let this one marinate. We need to let the flavors seep in. I think they need to be taking this one and give it a full court press. Give this Israel Adesanya, by almost any metric, is one of your 5 biggest stars in the sport. A guy who has the potential to really break through into a tier of stardom the UFC doesn't frequently have. It's going to be bad. There are going to be parts of this that are cringeworthy and tough, but I think you give this the full court. All right, the rest of this year is basically booked up. We will set this for January, and we want to make this happen in Australia or New Zealand because that's where we want to do it. Let's start getting a venue ready. Let's get this fight set for January, start of the new year, and let's give a press tour on this. Let's get this built in a proper way to let everything really develop. And I think that's what's going to happen. I think they will maybe initially try and do it, but cooler heads will prevail and realize that 8 weeks, just not enough time for a fight of this magnitude and this quality. And we need to give this one a little extra TLC.
Can I just say something?
Sure.
This is a byproduct of the way I was raised. I'm not against putting baked beans on top of the ketchup, on top of a hot dog. And when I walk around on the streets, people are always like, BC, you gas station piece of shit. How could you hurl insults at Jed? Isn't that just like the Spider-Man meme? It is. And that's why I know that Jed's an absolute dirt hole. I see you right here. Okay. So don't be trying to talk about
we know our own.
My swine cuisine over yours. Thank you. Yes.
Just saying, let that chicken marinade, buddy, just overnight. It's all you need.
Hey, I've eaten plenty of chicken out of a gas station. All right. I'll do it again.
Hot dogs and beans are a New England delicacy. You kidding me? Yeah. With some brown bread on the side. Yeah. A little bit of brown bread.
An actual thing.
Oh yeah. Hot dogs and beans. What are we having for dinner, Ma? Hot dogs and beans, Michael. Ah, yes, it must be Tuesday. So let's move on.
I learned something new.
Yeah, man. It's like $1.99 a person. Point for round 3 goes to. It's BC. It's 2-1. Good battle here. Good battle. Most of this is just see Jed's face when he doesn't get.
I thought raisins in the potato salad was done. I thought I cooked him there.
That was a great line. It was a tremendous line. I don't know how much time we're going to spend on this, but BC UFC Vegas 77 is coming up. On Saturday, Holly Holm is back in our lives. She is in the main event against Mayra Bueno Silva. We just found out that Jack Della Maddalena is part of the co-main event. And then there's 11 other fights that are going to happen on this card. So give this a grade, BC. What are we giving UFC Vegas 77?
I was really excited that Walt Harris was set to bring his 3-fight losing streak against Josh Parisian, who's lost like 3 out of his last 5. But even that fight just fell apart. So, yeah, we get Mr. Bob Dabalina in the co-main event fired up, following his story literally against any level of opponent is worth your time. But let's be really honest here. This is arguably the worst. Seriously, it's arguably the worst UFC Fight Night card we've ever seen. That's not, though, the big, grandstanding argument I'm going to make. Look, it's not lost on me. We just had 290. Like that's everything you would want. And yes, if they're going to fill out cards most weekends, we can't expect everyone to be a banger. All of that is true, by the way. If this one had even a little bit more of intention, I might have changed my tune. But the main reason why I think I'm allowed to stay in the negative lane so shortly removed from the best this sport can be is because there's just an abject lack of care to what's really going on here. Amanda Nunes retired a month ago. There has seemingly, I'm not in the UFC office. They don't let me in the war room, right? There's seemingly been nothing done about what's the future of both of those titles. Is there even a future for women's featherweight, which the night that Amanda retired, Dana sort of kind of admitted, yeah, probably not going to go forward with that division anymore. So what do we have here? Arguably like the number one person you would probably want to put into a vacant bantamweight title fight, Holly Holm, who at 41 really, to her credit, has not really changed how good of a fighter that she was now to 5 years ago. She's only, she's evolving. She's leaning more on her wrestling these days. I know people think she's more boring these days, but against this level of competition, she's still very viable and a good ass fighter. And we don't know what we're doing with both divisions. We have actually a decent featherweight fight on this card. Norma Dumont against Chelsea Chandler of the 209. And what are they fighting for, guys? We've never had featherweight rankings on the UFC page ever. Now the division's clearly dead. Is everybody just fighting out their contract before we can fold it completely and then you guys can go to the PFL and get in the Larissa Pacheco sweepstakes? I don't know. But here's what I do know. To just not have seemingly a plan, and again, to spend all your time pushing power slap down our throat, could have used less of the Wolverine handing out CTE like a biatch, and I could have used more of, hey guys, maybe we actually should pull Holly off of this card if we want her to fight Juliana for the vacant belt, or maybe we should actually do something. I don't know what this is because it's nothing. And that's not here to crap on Mayra Bueno Silva or anybody, but this card sucks. And we got 2 prominent women's fights atop the marquee that kind of don't really mean anything because of the circumstances of right now. The lack of communication on some of these sort of foundational elements of the UFC, the structural elements, is maddening to me. And the fact that you sort of just are reactionary. Well, as long as Amanda's still going to fight, we'll just keep both divisions open. Okay, cool. She's been retired for a month. What the hell are we doing? These are the moments when, as a fan, you do have to question, do I really have this in my schedule and time every week if some of these dots aren't connected? This is default, prerequisite. Get the shit handled, okay? I'll deal with the power slap emails if I know there's a future here at 35 and 45, or are we just rolling out fights because we're just rolling out fights? What are we doing? You just had the best weekend ever last weekend. Let's build on it, people. Thank you. That's my TED Talk. Thank you.
Yeah, you're giving us a 10 p.m. Eastern main card with 6 fights. Then you're going to London next week. This is just...
It's also a bad card.
It's not a very good
Look,
card.
there are 2 title fights this week. We got 2 title fights. We got the women's bantamweight and the women's featherweight. And it may very well be the final women's featherweight fight that ever happens inside the UFC. It's historic. You guys are, oh, it's so terrible. Look, is it going to be fun? No. Holly Holm hasn't been fun to watch in literal years. The last time Holly Holm was fun was when she was kicking Betch Kahea in the head, which was 6 years ago. So no, it's going to be awful. I'm not here to say you're going to have fun, but this is the Holly Holm versus Mayra Bueno Silva is the uncrowned bantamweight champion fight. So that's sort of important, I guess. And then Norma Dumont, Chelsea Chandler's the last featherweight fight that's ever going to happen in the UFC. So that's historic, if nothing else. And then the rest of this card is awful. You look at this and say, wow, and we lost Walt Harris versus Josh Parisian. I look at this and say that's kind of a tragedy because, you know, I love the heavyweight fights, but also thank God we lost Walt Harris versus Josh Parisian. It's going to be a terrible fight. We could lose a couple more fights on this card. We might be cooking with gas. If we can lose the main event and it's just Jack Della Maddalena executing some dude at the top of the card, then we're really starting to make some things happen. So it's not good, but we've got like 3 lightweight fights on this card. That's really fun because lightweights are always really fun. And I did my best, guys. I tried to sell it.
Good
I
job.
can only do so much.
The king of positivity? When did this happen?
Look, Ahmed Izatar versus Francisco Prado is going to be super damn fun. And when has Terrence McKinney ever been in a boring fight? The answer is never. Him versus Nazim Sadikov is going to be a banger for however long that lasts. Those two, not saying they're worth the price of admission because that would be hypocritical of me to claim that. But if you're not doing anything else on Saturday night, at the very least, the opener, 3 of the 5 main card fights here are going to be pretty fun because Jack Della killing some dude is always a good watch.
Yeah, but
Wow,
wasn't
we
the
got some
stat that
returning
you have
fighters.
don't you have to get through like 8 fights on this undercard before you find a ranked fighter?
Oh, I don't.
Or did that change? I think that changed.
I don't.
With some of the
I think the only ranked fighter is Holly Holm and
I think
Mayra
there's
Bueno
like
Silva.
4
I
of
think
28
Jamont and Chandler
fighters
both are.
in a division
Why?
that doesn't exist. Just so you know,
That's insane.
They have them
if
ranked
they're
as bantamweights.
Yeah, that's insane. I don't have any of them ever actually fought at bantamweight in the UFC. That's nuts. So I'm not going to count those because that's ridiculous. But yeah, look, the key thing that you just said though, BC, is that you have to get through like 8 fights, and you actually don't. You can just not watch the prelims. You can tune into MMAfighting.com, great website. Any fun things that happen, we'll do a breakout highlight post for you. You can watch that. And then you can just turn this on. You can watch like a movie, hang out with your kids, do something else Saturday night. And at 10 p.m. is the start time for the main card. Just toggle on over to ESPN Plus at 10 p.m. You're going to get Terrence McKinney right out of the gate. That's going to be sick. You're going to get Izatar Prado. That's going to be really fun. And then you can watch the rest of it if you like, or you can just be like, that's enough for me. I'll come back in an hour and a half and watch Jack Della beat the hell out of somebody. And that's a good way to do it. If I'm plotting out a path for the casual MMA fan, that's what I'd say. Don't pay attention until 10. Tune in for those 2 fights. Maybe have a smoke break, hang out, do whatever, come back for Jack Della, and then call it a night, and you're good.
don't tell me how to
maybe
live my life.
Yeah, maybe watch a Tyson Nam fight because you know someone's going to sleep when he fights, whether it's him or his opponent. It's always fun watching.
And
Tyson
look,
Nam.
Azat Maxon, 16-0, like a little older for a debuting prospect. I think he's 29, something like that. But good signs, at least, being the 16 wins is 16 wins. Really hard to do in the sport, even if you're fighting total can. So that fight's at least like kind of fun. Some of the fights can be fun, but they're all meaningless, which is pretty tough.
Yeah. Well, let us move on. The point for round 4. There'll be more UFC Vegas 77 talk throughout the weekend, so get ready. Point goes to the king of positivity, Jed Meshew. It's 2-2.
Look, with AK on vacation, somebody had to step up and be positive. And that's where I'm
someone
coming.
had to step up and watch the Ultimate Fighter.
This fight, Doug Crosby in a Turkish bath. What's going on here?
I don't know.
That's an awful
Well, you're up to-
image.
Yeah, geez Louise. All right, well, it's time for the knockout round, everybody. Excuse me. One question will decide it all. Each will have 60 seconds to answer, and this will be a fun question. So, Jed, you're the king. You get priority. I know BC won last week, but
let's
have all
live
the
our
shenanigans.
dreams. Let's go first.
Okay.
I'm
Well,
feeling the vibes right now.
so Friday was an interesting day because Ariel Hawani, our wonderful colleague at MMAfighting.com, host of the MMA Hour, tweets out that Francis Ngannou, Tyson Fury is going to be announced very soon. And immediately, well, not immediately, but a few hours later, we get the John Jones-Stipe fight announced just randomly right before the ceremonial weigh-ins for UFC 290. Then we find out Francis Ngannou, Tyson Fury.
Such a coincidence.
Such a coincidence. Then we find out on Tuesday that Ngannou Fury is official, and we have been waiting We have been waiting with bated breath. What is this next big fight the UFC is going to announce? So, Jed, you are now Dana White, and for the next 60 seconds, you have to get our minds off of Ngannou versus Fury by announcing the fight that we're going to get next. The big announcement. What's this big announcement that's going to get us to forget about Ngannou Fury at least for a few minutes? 1 minute on the clock. You're up, Dana. Go.
Look, I'm glad I went first because there's only one answer here, guys. Look, we put on the biggest fights, the fights you all want to see. I know the fight that everyone has been wanting to see. It's been building for years at this point in time. You all said it couldn't be done, and the bullshit media came at me with some totally valid quotes that I'm just going to say aren't true, but it's fine because we're doing it. Conor McGregor versus Michael Chandler. That's going to be headlining our December pay-per-view. It'll be happening in Las Vegas at the T-Mobile Arena. You're coming at me. You're saying, oh, but what about USADA? I got USADA. Don't worry about that. I got this. Let me worry about USADA and all of that. You guys just worry about buying your plane tickets, getting out to Vegas, because these two dudes, you saw the shove? The big shove in the face? They're going to do that, but with their fists. It's going to be great. Michael Chandler's going to be screaming about see you at the top. Conor McGregor's going to act like a lunatic and probably get arrested in the build-up at some point in time. December 13th, whatever the date is, buy tickets now.
Okay. Conor McGregor, Michael Chandler. BC?
Yeah.
Now you're Dana White. Just what you wanted on a Thursday afternoon. What's the big announcement? You know it's coming. It's probably coming either after this show or tomorrow, but you know it's coming. What's the big fight that is going to be announced to get our minds off of this? Go.
Well, if you're Dana White and Francis Ngannou cannot succeed because of the potential of what that shows to other UFC fighters who are currently getting underpaid so that the parent company can pay off this WWE acquisition, you need not just a regular super fight, not just the gimmick. You know, you can't beat a gimmick by going gimmick. You need the type of fight that brings back the crossover audience, the soccer moms, the regular guys at work, anyone walking by the water cooler at the right time. The kind of fight where the names need no introduction, doesn't even need a current storyline. They'll get you up. They'll have you buying cage fighting once again like it's 2012 all over again. Who's that person? Oh, guess what, guys? She's also in the company, and she's on the verge of exiting her WWE deal. It's Ronda friggin' Rousey. Why is Holly Holm not being considered for the vacant bantamweight title fight? Because Ronda versus Misha 3 is the only fight left that can break the casual jar in case of emergency and flush all the goodwill to Francis right down the drain again. You want crossover? You want big appeal? Call up all the Eskimo bros because she's back, baby. Ronda Misha for all the marbles.
You were so close. You were so close.
Boy,
It's Ronda Holly. It's not Misha 3. That's
that
not
won't work.
it.
Holly's fighting this weekend, bro. Holly's rematch is the better sell, but she's fighting this weekend against Bueno. It's no Bueno.
She's fighting this weekend. She's going to beat Bueno. And then it's like, all right. I mean, can you imagine the scenes if Ronda gets smuggled into the Apex to do a post-fight face-off with Holly?
Oh, my God.
No one will see it coming. And then it's like, hey, guys, so headlining our December pay-per-view, Ronda Rousey, Holly Holm, bantamweight belt. Seriously,
Juliana
that's Pena.
In the illegal streaming era, that's still a 1.5 million pay-per-view buy. Ronda Holly 2 for the belt. Yes, it is.
If that happens, I will then ceremoniously hand this crown off. If we get Ronda Tate 3.
Oh man, you put it out there.
It's out there.
That's the cast your vote music. So cast your votes. I don't even know how close this is or whatnot, but this is a fun show. I cannot believe my voice went through almost 90 whole minutes of this.
Well done.
I know. It's so weird. I've been sucking on some. This is not a plug, but some Vapor Cools. These things have really helped me out. So I'm just talking out of the right side of my face right now. So vote now, 3 times, as Casey said. There may be a preview show tomorrow. There may not be a preview show tomorrow. I don't know. We're gonna try to do Heck of a Morning tomorrow. I'll let you know on Twitter whether or not that's gonna happen. People's pre-fight show going down. I believe it's 6:30 p.m. on Saturday to get you ready for UFC Vegas 77. Then we'll have a post-fight show.
Gotta
we'll
get
have it
ready
on
for
to the
that
next
one.
We'll have it on to the next one. Jed, you might have to check your DMs. I may need you to step in if you want to do some matchmaking on Sunday. And what a card to jump on for. I'm sure it'll be a nice, tight.
I'm going to tell you now,
22-minute
Holly
show.
Holm versus Ronda Rousey will be my match that needs to be made.
Oh, man. Casey, are you there? Where is he? There he is. Sun's out, guns out. What's up, buddy?
Good afternoon, gentlemen. Great competition today. We have a winner. We have a winner.
Okay. Who won?
Your winner today with 59% of the votes is and still undefeated, Brian Campbell.
Wow.
We talked about this, guys. We talked about this last week. You were supposed to vote for me. This is appeal. Nonsense, viewers.
We haven't had an emergency meeting of the BTL Championship Committee in a little while, so we might have to call something to order. BC gets the people's vote again. BC, congrats. What do you have to say?
I would say I haven't seen a boxing guy thrive on this network since Ariel tried to reinvent himself this year. The streak is still intact. Look at me right now. I want to brag more, but look at the guy I beat. He dresses like the Burger King. He's got a creepy smile like Ronald McDonald. He's as corny as Papa John, and I've seen his search history. It's just like Jared from Subway, but I still beat him.
Jed? There you
go. I'm just disappointed in you. Not you, Mike, you, the viewers. We talked about this last week. We said that I call my shot. I get it. I deserve to be rewarded, and all of you are just bitter. It's just a bunch of Robert Whittaker fans. Might be a bunch of Bobby Knuckle burners just in there voting. He's mad that I manifested this reality where he lost. So suck it to all of you. I'm disappointed in you.
Well, the good news is a lot of people did listen, Jed, because this is a much closer battle than it was last week or maybe the previous iterations of the BC versus Jed Mishu matchup. So some people listen, but we can't get everybody to listen. Can't get everybody on the same page. Casey, you can hit the music. We are done. What a show. What an event UFC 290 was. And who knows? Maybe we'll come back next week and be like, wow, that UFC Vegas 77, second best event of the year.
I'm pretty
doubt
confident we will not.
We'll find out if that's what happens right here next week on BTL. For BC, for Jed, Casey on the ones and twos, the iconic voice of Esterlin will take you home. I am Mike Keck, back next week. Good night, everybody. Love y'all.
This has been Between the Links, an MMA fighting production on the Vox Media Network.